You're looking at Brenda's pristine, pearl-white luxury SUV, currently sitting nose first in a mud trench deep enough to swallow a man whole. Her platinum member, Oak Haven Estates sticker dangling by a single thread of adhesive, flapping in the wind like a white flag of surrender. Did I touch her car? Absolutely not. My gravity-assisted displacement prototype did. After 6 months of trespassing, legal threats, and her literally flipping me off on a live stream, she looked me dead in the eyes and yelled, "Do it." So, I pulled the lever. But to understand why a grown man would spend his savings building a medieval siege engine disguised as a parking spot, we have to go back to the morning this war started. The sun hadn't even crested the ridge when I walked out onto my porch with a steaming mug of black coffee, the air crisp enough to wake your bones before your brain catches up, and I looked out toward the western property line of my 100-acre farm in Blackwood County, expecting to see nothing but morning mist and my cattle grazing on the ryegrass. Instead, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, glistening like a diamond in a pile of coal, was Brenda's SUV, parked a good 50 yards onto my land, practically buried in the soft earth of my lower field, right next to a fence post I had just repaired. It looked ridiculous, the rear end crooked, the front wheels hanging uselessly over a dip in the terrain. Mud splashed up the side panels like Mother Nature herself had slapped the arrogance right off the chassis. And on the back window, beneath a layer of brown clay, was that decal she loved so much. Live, laugh, love. Only now, thanks to a smear of muck, it read something closer to live, laugh, low. I didn't push it, I didn't tow it, gravity did the heavy lifting, but before the physics took over, there was the history. See, before I was a farmer, I was a systems engineer for Global Logistics Corp., spending 2 decades optimizing supply chains, shaving seconds off delivery times, living under fluorescent lights, and breathing recirculated air until one day, staring at a spreadsheet at 2 a.m., I felt something inside me snap, just a quiet, internal fracture that said, "I'm done." I cashed out, moved as far from the city as I could get, and bought this land because it sat right on the edge, but completely outside of, the jurisdiction of Oak Haven Estates, a soulless grid of identical McMansions where the grass is measured with rulers and the neighbors spy on each other with drones. For 3 years, it was paradise, just me, the wind in the tall grass, and the physical, honest ache of hard work, until Brenda rolled into my life like a Panzer tank in designer sunglasses. It started on a Tuesday, a day so unremarkable I can barely remember the weather, when I heard an engine that didn't belong. Not the rattle of a tractor or the hum of a pickup, but the purr of a high-performance V8. I stepped out of the barn to see this white behemoth cruising down my private gravel drive, blowing past the private property signs without tapping the brakes, and turning straight into my cornfield, crushing saplings that I had spent weeks nurturing. I walked over, trying to keep my cool, thinking maybe she was lost, maybe she needed help, but when she stepped out, wearing shoes that cost more than my first truck, she didn't look confused, she looked annoyed that I existed. "Ma'am," I called out, keeping my voice steady. "This is private property, you can't park here." She lowered her sunglasses, looked at me, then looked at the crushed corn, and let out a laugh that sounded like glass breaking in a dishwasher. "Relax," she said, waving a manicured hand. "It's just dirt. This is the Oak Haven overflow area. We've always parked here for events." "No," I corrected her. "This is a working farm. I own this land, and you are destroying my crop." She looked at me with pity, actual pity, and said, "You must be new. You don't know how things work. I'll be gone in an hour." And then she just walked away, leaving her car sitting there like a monument to entitlement. If it had happened once, maybe I would have let it slide. Maybe I would have written it off as ignorance. But the first time shows you who a person is, the second time shows you what they want, and the third time tells you what you have to do. 2 days later, she was back, cutting deeper ruts into the field, and a week later, her friends joined in, a convoy of SUVs using my land as a shortcut to their clubhouse because the main road had a speed bump they didn't like. I put up signs, metal ones, reflective ones, signs that said active farm, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. And I watched from my kitchen window as Brenda slowed down, read the sign, smirked, and drove right over a young soybean patch to park next to it. I went to my lawyer, Arthur Vance, A man who looks like a bulldog and fights like one too. And we sent certified letters, cease and desists, detailed maps showing the property lines, but she just tore them up and left the confetti in my driveway. She even sent me an email claiming she had a historical easement based on a map she clearly drew herself in Microsoft Paint, featuring a pink line cutting through my barn labeled Community Access Zone. But the breaking point, the moment the switch in my head flipped from annoyed neighbor to tactical engineer, wasn't the corn, it wasn't the ruts, it was Luna. Luna was my prize heifer, gentle as a dog, pregnant with her second calf, and she was grazing near the fence line one evening when Brenda came tearing through the field at 40 miles an hour, blaring bass-heavy pop music, honking her horn because my cattle were blocking her shortcut. Luna panicked, terrified by the noise and the speeding metal beast, and she bolted, slipping in the mud, twisting her hips violently before crashing to the ground with a sound I will never forget. I ran to her, but Brenda didn't stop. She didn't even tap her brakes. She just sped off to her wine mixer or whatever circle of hell she was late for. I spent that entire night in the barn with the vet, watching Luna heave and tremble, her eyes wide with pain, and by morning, we had lost the calf. A stillborn, a life that never got to start because someone didn't want to drive around the block. I sat there in the straw, listening to the silence where a heartbeat should have been, and I felt something harden in my chest, a cold, metallic resolve that whispered, no more. The law wasn't working, words weren't working, shame wasn't working because Brenda had none, so I decided to speak the only language she understood, consequence. The morning after Luna lost her calf, I walked out to the field and saw 3 more cars parked there, guests for some baby shower in Oak Haven, waving at me like I was the hired help, and I realized that to them. I wasn't a person, I was a backdrop, and my land was just an extension of their playground. I drove into town and sat down with Arthur Vance again, slamming a notebook onto his mahogany desk. I want to build a gate, I told him, but not just a gate. I want to build a compliance mechanism. Arthur looked at my sketches, his eyebrows climbing higher with every page. If you build a trap, Elias, you go to jail, he warned, tapping his pen on the paper. You cannot booby-trap your property. You cannot build something designed to cause injury. It's not a trap, I said, pointing to the schematics. It's a gravity-assisted tilting platform, fully signed, marked as hazardous machinery, with a manual release lever. If someone parks on it despite the warnings, and gravity decides to relocate them to the mud trench I happen to have dug for drainage, well, that's just physics, isn't it? Arthur stared at me for a long time. Then a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. If you put up the signs, he said softly, and I mean industrial-grade safety warnings, and you give a verbal warning before activation, technically, you're just operating heavy equipment on your own land. I went to work immediately. I have a background in mechanical load-bearing systems, so I designed a platform using reclaimed railway sleepers and reinforced steel hinges, disguised to look like a premium, flat parking pad right at the edge of the slope. I installed a heavy-duty detent lock, a mechanism that holds the platform level until a release pin is pulled, at which point the entire surface tilts to a 45-degree angle. I dug the trench at the bottom of the slope, my drainage ditch, and let the rain fill it with 3 feet of thick, glorious, unchecked slurry. I tested the system with huge hay bales, then with an old rusted tractor chassis, watching with grim satisfaction as the latch clicked, the platform dipped, and the payload slid smoothly, gently, inevitably into the muck. It was safe, it was slow, and it was absolutely devastating. To make it legal, I turned my property into a visual assault of warnings. Danger, automated platform, active machinery, unstable ground, do not enter. Signs so big you could see them from space. But I knew Brenda. I knew her ego needed bait. So right in the center of the trap, I placed the cherry on top. A pristine, professional metal sign that read, VIP parking. Authorized personnel only. I knew, in my soul, that she wouldn't see the danger signs. She would only see the VIP and think, that's for me. I waited 3 days, sitting on my porch like a sniper, checking the monitors of the cameras I had installed to document every single second. On the 4th afternoon, the sky was a bruised purple, and I heard the engine. Brenda's white SUV appeared on the horizon, gleaming, spotless, rolling past the "No trespassing" signs, past the danger signs, and straight toward the wooden platform. I watched on the monitor as she saw the VIP parking sign, and I swear I saw her smile, a smug little twitch of the lips as she thought, finally, he recognizes who I am. She pulled onto the platform, the wood creaking under the weight, her tires settling into the grooves I had carved, and she put it in park. I grabbed my megaphone and walked out, stopping exactly 40 yards away, safe, calm, and recording everything. "Attention, driver of the white SUV," I boomed, my voice echoing off the hills. "Brenda, you are parked on active hydraulic farm machinery. This is unsafe. Move your vehicle immediately." She rolled down her window, poked her head out, and laughed. "Oh, give it a rest, Elias," she shouted back, adjusting her sunglasses. "I'm late for the board meeting. Stop being so dramatic. Nobody cares about your little tractor games." "This is a tilting platform," I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. "You have 10 seconds to vacate before the mechanism engages. This is your final warning." She revved her engine, mocking me. "You touch my car, and I'll sue you for every acre you own," she screamed, her face twisting into that familiar mask of rage. 5 seconds, I counted down. "Last chance, Brenda. Move or gravity takes over." She leaned halfway out the window, looking me dead in the eye, and shrieked the words that would seal her fate. "You don't have the guts. Do it." Time seemed to slow down. I looked at her. I looked at the spot where Luna had lost her calf, and I looked at the lever in my hand, disguised as a fence brake. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a profound sense of duty. "Acknowledged," I whispered. I pulled the lever. Clank. The sound of the steel detent releasing was louder than a gunshot, a cold, industrial snap that made the birds go silent. Brenda's eyes went wide as the horizon line in her rearview mirror suddenly shifted. The platform didn't launch her. It simply let go. The front of the SUV pitched up, the rear pitched down, and with a slow, agonizing groan of tires losing friction, the car began to slide backwards. "No, no, no," she screamed, slamming on the brakes. But brakes don't work on a wooden slide tilted at 45 degrees. Whoosh. The SUV slid backward, smooth as silk, picking up speed for just a second before hitting the transition point and plunging rear first into the mud trench. Squelch. It wasn't a crash, it was a wet, heavy, sucking sound, like the earth itself was swallowing a giant lozenge. Mud exploded upward in a brown geyser, coating the pristine white paint, covering the windshield, obliterating the sunroof. The SUV settled with a heavy lurch, stuck fast, wheels spinning uselessly in the slurry, the engine sputtering and dying. Silence returned to the farm, broken only by the hysterical shrieking coming from inside the mud-caked cabin. For a solid 10 seconds, Brenda just sat there, encased in her luxury tomb, staring out through a windshield that was now 90% opaque brown sludge. Then the door cracked open, fighting the suction of the mud, and she spilled out, one high heel immediately disappearing into the abyss, stumbling like a drunken sailor as she clawed her way up the slippery bank. "You killed me," she screamed, wiping mud from her mouth, her designer blouse ruined. "You psychotic hillbilly, you tried to murder me." I stood there, camera steady, red light blinking. "You were warned," I said calmly. "Verbal warning given. Signage posted. You requested activation. It's all on video." She scrambled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she dropped it in the mud, fished it out, and started dialing with gritty fingers. "I'm calling the police. I'm calling Todd. You're going to prison." "I already called the sheriff," I said, checking my watch. He was listening to the live stream. Right on cue, Sheriff Miller's cruiser rolled down the drive, crunching gravel. He stepped out, adjusted his belt, and looked at the scene. The tilted platform, the signs shouting danger, and the white SUV looking like a hippo wallowing in a swamp. Brenda rushed him, grabbing his uniform with muddy hands. "Arrest him." He used a catapult. He launched my car. Sheriff Miller gently removed her hands from his shirt, stepping back to avoid the filth. "Ma'am," he drawled, looking at the platform. "That don't look like a catapult, that looks like a slide." "It's a weapon," she shrieked. I stepped forward. "Officer, it's a gravity-assisted cargo unloader. I use it for hay." She parked in the loading zone after being told to move. She literally told me to do it. I played the video. Sheriff Miller watched the screen, watched her flip me off, heard the do it, and heard the mechanical clank. He bit his lip, trying desperately not to laugh. "Ma'am," the sheriff said, turning to her, "you are trespassing on a posted industrial site. You instructed the operator to engage the mechanism. I can't arrest a man for following your orders on his own land." Brenda gaped, her mouth looking like a black hole of disbelief. She called Todd, putting him on speaker. "Todd, he destroyed the car. Get down here." Todd's voice crackled through the muddy phone speaker, tired and defeated. "Brenda, are you on the farm again? I told you, if you go back there, I'm done. I'm not coming." And he hung up. Then she called her lawyer. He didn't even let her finish. "If you trespassed again, Brenda, I can't help you. Don't talk to the cops." Click. The tow truck arrived an hour later. Old man Jeb, who has been pulling idiots out of ditches since the Reagan administration, looked into the trench and whistled. "Differential is gone, sensors are fried, undercarriage is twisted. That's totaled, sweetheart. Gonna cost you $600 just to drag it out." But the real kicker, the moment that tasted sweeter than any harvest wine, came when she tried to file the insurance claim right there on her app. She got an automated rejection email 2 minutes later. I saw her face crumble as she read it. It turns out, willful trespassing and intentional disregard of safety warnings falls under a clause most insurance companies call gross negligence. They weren't paying a dime. Brenda slumped onto a rock, defeated, mud drying in her hair, looking at her ruined SUV. As the winch pulled it out, a chunk of mud fell off the back window, revealing that Live, Laugh, Love sticker. The love had been ripped off, so it just read Live, Laugh. Even the universe was mocking her. Sheriff Miller handed her a stack of citations thick enough to be a novel. Criminal trespass, destruction of private property, livestock endangerment. "You have court on the 15th, he said. "I suggest you wear clean shoes." A week later, I got a letter from the new board president of Oak Haven. They had voted Brenda off the board. She and Todd were selling the house. Rumor had it the divorce was messy. I sat on my porch that evening, the sun setting over the corn, the air silent and sweet. No engines, no honking, just the wind. I didn't feel like a hero, and I didn't feel like a villain. I just felt like a man who drew a line in the dirt and defended it. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world where people think they can walk all over you just because they have a nicer car and a louder voice, where is the line between petty revenge and necessary justice? Did she deserve to lose a $80,000 car for parking in a field? Or was that the only price high enough to make her understand the value of the word no? You tell me. But if you're ever in Blackwood County, stay off the grass. Gravity is a harsh mistress.